the other officers at the scene at that night, so we're dealing with a limited amount of evidence, but with the evidence we did have, we showed, I think, in this response, in which we have many copies here for the media and others, we tried to do our best to really, try and expose the contradictions in her report, basically the bias, the inconsistencies, and so on. And we have several speakers here today who are going to, go into that at some length. My name is Ann Wiles. I'm a civil rights attorney in Oakland. And our first speaker today is John Burris, who many of you know, who's also one of the attorneys that's seeking to enforce the consent decree that the City of Oakland has failed to implement for now 9 years, and which is going to court on a motion to put OPD in trusteeship. And that date is December 13 at 10 o'clock. And so, John Burris, would you like to comment on that?
First off, one of the things that most recently was decided by the Monitor was the type of investigations that OPD engages in with respect to its police shootings. And part of that is sort of a predisposition to find support for the police officer's conduct. And this is often sanctioned by the district attorney's office. And I think it's, having been involved in many, many police shootings involving the City of Oakland, not once has the district attorney's office ever found that criminal charges should be filed against an officer. This is particularly shocking when you consider some of the level of shootings that have taken place in the past. I often make reference to Jody Woodfox. Some of you covered that when I was involved in it, with a young man who was shot 3 times in the back. And even under those circumstances, the district attorney's office did not take action against them. And so I think it's entirely appropriate that in this particular case, where the community has essentially said that the practice that you've involved in the past with ship shot practices or investigations and work that is essentially designed to support the police is not acceptable. That a complete, thorough investigation should have taken place, one that should have considered both the positive and the negatives in that particular case. As the civil rights attorney looking at the case from a civil rights perspective, I recognize that my responsibilities are different than the district attorney's office, which is looking at criminal charges. But the investigation and the quality of that investigation should still be at a very high level. And that level was not attained in this particular case. I am particularly offended as I look at the investigative report, and I can see where the issue of whether Allen had a gun or not is raised, but the DA never considered that he may not have had that gun at the time he was shot and killed. That the mere possession of the gun in and of itself is not a basis to kill someone. The question is, what did the person do with the gun at the time that you pulled your trigger? And in this particular case, 3 different shots were fired. And there's real evidence that given the location where the gun ultimately was found 20 feet away, there was no discussion in the DA's office of the report as to how that could have happened. And the possibility that if the gun is 20 feet away, maybe he didn't have the gun at the time he was in fact shot. Coupled with the fact that the DA never mentioned in the report that Allen said, "I ain't done nothing." No person who had pointed a gun at a police officer and threatened to kill that police officer would make that kind of statement. But that is an exculpatory type of statement that should have been put forth in the report. The location of the gun, the part that is most equally disturbing is that there's a gun, a photograph of a gun that is taken in a bed of rocks. It's pretty clear that the gun was never found there. That is a staged situation. So the question is, how did it get there? Who moved that particular gun? Where was that gun particularly found? Ultimately, it said that a portion of the gun had been, the ammunition portion had been taken out, and that a fingerprint was found on that gun. Well, the truth of the matter is, when did that take place? And where did that take place? And who did those? And the interesting part about that is, it obviously did not occur at the location where it was photographed at. And so these are the kinds of questions that have me very disturbed, because when you listen to what The officer said, he raises a particularly interesting question is, I swear I saw a gun. That's not the kind of statement that you would say if you saw the gun at the time that you were in fact that the gun was pointed at you. So from my point of view, all evidence, every fact pattern that was there was interpreted in such a way to give the benefit of the doubt to the officer. There was no consideration given to the fact that maybe it did not happen the way this officer said it did. Aside from that, one of the major issues that we've been confronting for years here in Oakland is a question of racial profiling. And what we have here is three young men, teenagers, just leaving one of the young men's grandfather's house where they had been watching the fight, and walked out of their house, and immediately they're stopped and accosted by these police officers. They had done nothing but walk in that street. Racial profiling. And that served as a basis to inquire of them, to rouse them, to then chase them down. It never, ever should have happened. The DA quickly says that it was a justifiable stop. The question is, what was so justifiable about it? That they were just young black men. To me, this is fundamentally wrong. And it goes to the underpinnings of all of what's wrong in the criminal justice system, and to some extent the civil rights system when it comes to the police, the African American community, and all those law enforcement agencies that are designed to protect and to enforce the laws of this country. So it is important, I think, and I know, for this particular committee to come forward and raise questions about the legitimacy of that investigation. And I wholeheartedly support it. We will continue forward on our civil rights case, but this is an important step to hold this particular agency accountable, and all other agencies. That no one should get a free ride, no agency should get a free ride when they're responsible for the well-being and the legitimacy of this community.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
We do have copies of the report here for all of those people who don't have a copy yet. And now I want to introduce Adam Bluford, who will say a few words and introduce his family and his wife, Geraldine, and are going to say also.
Close enough. I'm Adam Bluford. I'm the proud father of Alan Bluford, the young man that were killed on May the 6th of this year. I'm here with my family, my nieces, my dad, my sister, and my lovely wife. We've been stricken by this for the last 5 months. There's different reports that's going out to brutalize my son in his death, character assassination at the least, to say the least. The last DA's report seems to want to make this out into some kind of drug transaction. These kids played Pop Warner football together. They knew each other all of their lives. And you know, it's strange to me that they will come out and say something like this about these young men. They were walking down the street. Alan was chased and he was murdered. And I'd like my wife to have a few words. Thank you.
My name is Geraldine Bluford. I'm the mother of Alan Bluford. Alan could not have a voice because he was murdered. He was murdered by Officer Masso, shot to death on his back. So I am Alan's voice.
Yes.
And I will say, as he stated, the last 3 sentences of his life, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. Why did you shoot me?
Oh my
Why
God.
did you kill my baby? We are going to stand. We demand a full investigation, whether it's from the feds, whether it's from whoever it is. We're not stopping at this DA's office to just tell us this was right and that it's okay to kill my son. We stand in solidarity with our JAM coalition to say we will not take this in our community.
That's right.
We will stand and fight and be a voice for Alan Bluford.
Right.
He didn't do anything.
That's right.
And I am here to stand and fight for him and be his voice. Why did you shoot him? You should be held accountable.
That's right.
This will not go on in our community no more. There's too many deaths here in Oakland, California. the killing.
Stop it.
Stop the killing. Stop the violence. You don't just harass someone because of the color of their skin. Our families fought for civil rights, and I will fight for Alan's civil rights.
Amen.
I didn't do anything.
That's right.
And as God as my witness, we will not stop. We're a family of faith, and we walk by faith and not by
right.
sight.
That's right. Amen.
And God will
Right.
avenge us of our
That's
enemies.
right.
God will expose all of the cover-ups, all of the lies.
Hallelujah.
We stand strong as God is our witness.
right.
We will not stop until we get justice for Alan. Justice for Alan. Justice for Alan. Justice for Alan. And I'm going to turn it over to our attorneys, Ann Wells and Walter Riley, who can give you the legal ramifications of why we should have a voice, why this is wrong in our communities, and why it must stop today. I am Alan Bluford.
Amen. Yes. Yes.
Alan
That's
Bluford.
all right. Yes.
Thank you. I've said some things before already, and John Burris and the speakers before me have made it very clear that we want to hold the District Attorney's Office accountable for this shoddy, unprofessional report. And in order to do that, we need to have a voice, and to a great extent, we need media to report the news, to give us that voice in the community. But we're going to have that voice by our own organization. We're going to have it by our own blogging, our own leafleting, and the rallies that we hope. But we hope that the city of Oakland and the people who want to fight for justice will understand that there is something wrong in the criminal justice system in general, and something very specifically wrong right here in Oakland. The district attorney has not filed cases against the police department, and in this particular instance, gave us a shoddy report that looks like boilerplate language.
Yes.
That's insulting. It's insulting to those of us who spend our times fighting for civil rights. It's insulting for those of us who pay taxes and think we have
Amen.
a right
Yes.
to have governmental agencies represent our interests. It's insulting to those of us who believe that there is this provision that says the DA should do an independent investigation, and it should be thorough and unbiased. And the DA does not even have the respect for us to even try to resolve the conflicts in the evidence that we have right now. Does not try to even answer the questions, just gives us a statement and knows that Oakland seems to accept it. It's an insult to Oakland.
Yes, it
If
is.
someone tells you a lie and expects you to just roll with it, it's insulting. And what they have done to us is tell us a lie,
Yes.
and expects
Devil.
us to roll with it, expects the community to accept it, and expects that there will be folks who will defend the DA, and expects there will be a discussion that says something must have gone wrong because Alan is dead, and if he died at the hands of police, then they must have had good reason for that. And that's what's intolerable in it's intolerable in Oakland. This Justice for Alan Bluford is part of a community effort, it's part of a citywide effort, a statewide and nationwide effort to try and turn that around. And at this point, we're going to take it to the DA. We're not asking necessarily for the DA to do another investigation because we believe the DA is biased. We believe that report is clear evidence of the bias of the DA. We believe that if the DA was taken into account, as the Oakland Police Department is, that there'd have to be a receiver that says that that is intolerable, that that's a violation of your sacred duty to do justice. That report cannot be accepted. It fails to reconcile forensic evidence presented by the coroner's report.
Right.
Fails to reconcile forensic evidence that was gathered from witnesses at the scene. Fails to account for the vast majority of witnesses that say that Alan was on the ground. the vast majority of witnesses would support the argument that Allen didn't have a gun when he was shot. When the police officer fired those fatal bullets into Allen, he didn't have a gun. And that gun that they found was 20 feet away, could not have possibly gotten there in a manner that they would seem to suggest that a right-handed man fatally shot with a bullet through his heart and somehow or another delivers the gun 20 feet behind him up to his left. Those are facts. And as we keep saying recently, facts do matter. The gun was never fired. They rely upon, in the report, incredibly, one of the young men who was arrested that night. We know from experience, the DA knows from experience, that that young man he was not even aware that Allen had been killed, but is trying to exonerate himself from anything. And they rely upon his report. When the next day that man clearly knows Allen, they've played together. They've been together for years.
Sleepovers.
The DA knows that. The DA knows that subsequent history, but yet reports that information as a fact for determining that the police shooting of Allen was justifiable. That is unconscionable. That does not stand in any other kind of system where we look for justice and look for honesty. The DA in Alameda County is growing and as an incredible agency for justice. We have to say that report is trash. What did Biden say of the words that Ryan the other day? Malarkey. Malarkey.
Yes.
It's malarkey. It's a term of art. That report is malarkey. And we're going to continue to look for other agencies to make an investigation, but we will continue to try and develop the evidence that will show that this report was biased, that the report was shoddy, and in the end, at the time that this case comes to a conclusion, we all are going to have to make some statements, come to some conclusions about what we do with the DA's office that tells such a blatant lie.
Any of you have any questions for the family or for Walter before we wrap it up here?
Legally, where do you go from here?
Legally, the civil rights case is going to continue. We are going to go to the federal Attorney General and ask for an investigation. Some of us are discussing going to the Attorney General and asking for an investigation. But we want further scrutiny. What we are looking for, though, is political action, political thought, consciousness from the community. And while we all do this, we all do these kinds of rallies and so forth, it's because we know that the Fifth Estate is an important part of this contract for seeking justice. And we are fighting to get the Fifth Estate to do a little bit more, not just report that incredible bit of malarkey, and to question. Everybody can look at the report and do the same things that we did. But now you have our statements, and you have the specifics of what we say were wrong. We're not trying to say that the DA, I'm not trying to say that the DA had to prosecute them, but I'm saying the DA totally disrespected us by failing to give us a critical analysis.
There's other investigations that are going on currently. How do you feel about prospects of all the others?
I don't know what other investigations are currently going on. John Barris is going to do discovery. The federal courts is going to require them to give information. But I don't know what other investigations. Ask the DA. The DA said in that report that the police department was responsible for doing the investigation. That's not what I understand is supposed to happen. The DA is supposed to do that investigation. Now, ask the DA what they mean and what she means and what her assistant means by saying that the police department is supposed to do a further investigation.
Any more questions?
I just want to make a comment. Originally, this story was reported as exchange of gunfire. They said our kids were, the second story was the kids were suspects in a burglary. All these things have went out the window now. It's all about they thought my son had a weapon or either drugs. What we think happened here is a fatal mistake. Once Masso, a military man, shoots himself he blacks out and stands over my son and murder him military style.
Yes.
This is what happened to my son. My son never pointed a gun.
No way.
We think that Masto shot himself and while shot, killed my son. You got to remember, first words he said to the police officer that arrived there is, "I swear he had a gun." His next words is, "I've been shot." Now we all know he shot himself. So we know what happened here. It wasn't that my son pointed a gun at him and he blacked out and killed him. He shot himself. That's enough for anybody to black out and murder someone. He's been to Iraq. He's a military veteran. He's been accused of abuse in New York. He's a police officer that's willing to chase my son a mile, not a quarter mile, at 12 o'clock at midnight and blame my son for his murder. This is incredible that you guys believe something like this.
And if he felt that his life was in so much jeopardy, why didn't he flip on the camera? Why did he run behind the car and call for backup? Why did he stand over my son and shoot him dead? A 150-pound kid, and you shoot him in the heart? What kind of cold, callous person are you? Who does that? And then you want us to take your report, take your word for it, and swallow that? No, 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 we will not do that. We will not stop until we get justice for Alan.
Never.
It's not right. And
not
the community and everybody else need to be as outraged and upset.
That's
You don't know what it's
That's
like
right.
to go home and not be able to see your son,
Never
not
do.
be able to go by his room and it's empty.
That's right.
You don't know that, and he's at home with his family. And my family is torn apart. We all cry. We all are shattered. Stand up, community. Do something. Stop standing by and letting them get away with this. We don't want, and we're not just angry people that's mad at the cops. We know there's some good cops, but there's enough bad cops that we need to get them out and get in some good cops.
Yes.
Stop this mess.
That's right. And we know our son. We know our child. We know our child. And we know our child did not point a gun at a police officer. That's right. We raised him in the church. We knew Alan just had enough sense. He wasn't that type of child to even have a gun. My nephew wasn't that type of child to point no gun at. They say you don't know your kid. Well, we know this much. We know him enough to know that he did not and would never, ever point a gun at the police. My nephew was too busy trying to make his mom and dad proud to graduate.
He was finna walk.
He was finna walk across the stage. So what is that? He got to point a gun at the police? No.
Thank
They
you.
call it malarkey? That's a whole lot of malarkey. And the first thing they say, the police, when they kill somebody's child, is they pointed a gun. And we're tired of hearing that. They pointed a gun.
They point a gun or they go for the waistband.
Yes.
Something that every civil rights attorney that's handled these cases know. Everybody in the community know that that's their first argument. You know, the officer says, I went into automatic reflex. I was afraid for my life, right out of the case law, that they've been taught and trained. We saw the suspect go for his waistband. We saw him looking as if he had something heavy in his pocket. You know, if every statement, every fact, every conclusion that the DA makes can be refuted, there's another argument to be made. If Alan went for his waistband, the DA is saying he was wearing baggy pants. And we see kids running for the bus stop every day, holding their pants up.
That's right. That's right.
Holding their pants up.
Yes, yes.
And they're going to claim that that's a good excuse for it. Because we find that people are willing to buy malarkey. And what we are is a movement in here. And one thing that's happening with this movement for justice, for Alan Bluford, for all the other kids that are being shot, is people are beginning to develop some commonality, some sense of unity. We see the folks from Oscar Grant here. We see people from Occupy. We see people from the movement that has challenged the 1% that are here, that are growing. We see a great movement in Oakland where we are coming to develop some sense of understanding. And it will not stand forever. We have to figure out how it's going to change.
I just want to remind you guys My son's last words was, "I didn't do anything. Why did you shoot me?" I didn't do anything was my son's last words.
Why did you shoot me?
Thank
It was a cover-up thing. I think it was a cover-up thing. Why did the police say he shot himself in the foot? He wanted to say that Allen shot him. The gun had never been found. Now how can he say that Allen shot at him? I pointed a gun at him. I think whatever he did to the foot, shot the gun and shot his foot with, he wasn't intended to say Allen shot him. But they found out the gun had never been fired. Well, how can Allen shot him when the gun never was fired? Okay, all of that was a cover-up thing. He shot himself. One he shot himself somewhere else. He had to shoot himself in the foot. It's a cover-up thing, what it was.
We definitely agree with that, and we thank you very much for coming. The Justice for Alan Bluford Coalition is having, okay.